Hello, friends. Greg Koukl, Stand to Reason. Glad you joined me here today. I was just thinking about our outpost strategy, which has been going great guns for the last few years, and Rabbi Lasher has been doing a fabulous job recruiting folk. We've got something like 140-something outposts now. We've got 38 states covered. We've got 9 different countries represented. Of course, now we're starting a new year. We want to just blow those numbers out of the water. Just keep going. And 38 states isn't enough. We want 50 states. We want an outpost in every single state. And by the way, you might want to think about this. You might want to go to str.org and look up the outpost section and open up the map, and you'll see where the outposts are currently. Might turn out that your state is one of the states without one, and maybe you're the person to open one there. It would be great. Now, this isn't my goal. It's not my bailiwick, so to speak. I let the team members run their own operations, but I would think it's great that in the next 12 months we have it as a goal. What's 38 from 50? 40, that's 20, that's 12. That's it, 12. The 12 states that are not represented are going to be taken care of. If you're in one of those 12 states, pray about it. Now, I'm not going to say if you feel led, because you don't have to feel led. You don't need God's permission to do a good thing. And starting an outpost in your community, in your local church, is a good thing. And if you have the skills, the capability, you jump through our hoops, you'll get vetted. If all works out, you want to lead something in your local community, then apply to be a outpost leader. It'd be great if we picked up. It's only 12. I thought 38. How many left? 12. 12 more, and we'll cover the country. And then we want to, of course, get more and more intensified, more and more in each state, but that's a good goal for us for this year. So if you want to do that, let me just see. We got a local thing here. Go to str.org/ what do you think? Outposts. str.org outposts to learn more. And if you don't know about these are local communities of Christians seeking answers to the hard questions. These are what I call the kindred spirits, or I've referred to as the dry tinder in your local community, who really like this stuff or are interested in learning more and are motivated. And maybe the rest of your community is not so hot about it. You can't build a fire with wet wood. So you get the dry tinder and find those people and gather together, and you meet with them, and we'll help you do it. We got it's turnkey, plug and play. We make it easy on you if you have the motivation to be a leader in this way and the commitment to be a leader in this way. We'll make it easier on you, okay? And outposts are led by a qualified director who provides STR content on Christian apologetics and leads discussions on defending the faith, okay? So that's the way it's characterized there, but of course you're not limited to our stuff. There are all kinds of great stuff out there that you can use and you can watch and your team can talk about when you get together. We're just giving you a leg up to get you rolling. So maybe this is the year for you to be an STR outpost director, all right? I think we just brought on a new person, yesterday in Seattle, Washington. Is that one of the 38 states? Did we just add a state there, or did we already have somebody in Washington? We don't know. Okay, well, we'll keep tabs on it. All right, we've got John in El Granada, California, waiting for quite a while. John, welcome to Stand to Reason.
Hi, Greg. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I don't know a whole lot about the second law of thermodynamics, but it seems to me that it's like everything is going from organization to disorganization. And then the theory of evolution is saying that things go from disorganization to organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like we can see that. I mean, from the moment we're born, we're dying, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everything is falling apart. Why is that not a good? I haven't heard that the second law of thermodynamics used as an argument to refute evolution.
Yeah.
Why is that not a good argument? Is, I guess, my question.
Well, because it needs to be carefully qualified. I think if many people who are familiar with the first and second law of thermodynamics are going to sniff at that kind of response, at least if it's not carefully qualified, as a misunderstanding of how the second law works. Now, it's called the second law of thermodynamics because it is a law that has to do with energy, heat. All right, and what that law says is that the universe, taken as a whole, is trending toward entropy. That is, the energy that is being used up to do work is not destroyed. That's the first law. It's just being lost for useful work. It's no longer available. And this is why, according to the second law, there will be a time when no more work can be done in the universe. The energy available will not be accomplishing anything because it will be dissipated out in a way that will not be able to be used. And that's called the universal heat death, when the entire universe will be at 0 Kelvin, which is as cold as it can get. Nothing's moving, everything's dead. Now, that's way down the line time-wise, but we're moving in that direction. Now, there's a usefulness, I think, for that, for the Christian. I think the Christian can say, well, look the universe is still warm, and it's cooling down, second law. If the universe were infinitely old, it would be cold, but it's not. That means it can't be infinitely old. When I say cold, I mean ultimate. It would be at 0 Kelvin right now, but it's not. It's kind of like when you watch the westerns, and the posse's out chasing the bad guy, and they come upon an encampment, and they go and they see if the coals are still hot. Oh, yeah. The coals are still hot. They're not far away, kind of thing. Well, it's the same concept, If you come into a room and you find a hot cup of coffee on the counter, somebody's just been there recently, So same idea. That is using the thermodynamics, the second law of thermodynamics, in a way to make the case for the origin of the universe. Now, I think it does have an application in the development of the universe, but I think we have to be careful because there are circumstances in which the second law, localized instances, in which the second law looks like it's being reversed. So the law applies to the entire universe as a whole, but in incidental circumstances, you can see not disorganization, but organization or complexity or something useful. Sometimes people have said, how can an explosion, like the Big Bang, cause all kinds of order and complexity and do work? And my answer is, well, it does that all the time. It's called the internal combustion engine. Your gas is exploding. But see, now you have a mechanism in place that is meant to take the explosion, in which in that explosion there is a release of energy which is useful for something, but then after the energy is gone, it's not anymore. But in that localized situation, it is doing something useful. But notice, in order to have I was just thinking another example of photosynthesis, might be a case. You got energy coming in from the sun, and it's being used to make something very complex. So it goes into the leaf, and the leaf produces a tomato, or something like that. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So this seems like a reversal, and this is what, if we're not careful, is going to be pushed back on us. Now, notice, though, in each of those cases, in order for the energy to be used to produce more complexity, there has to be some kind of machine that allows that to happen. There's got to be a vehicle. So you have the internal combustion engine, or you have the process of photosynthesis in the plant. Now, there's where I think you can have a discussion. Say, if it is just energy being dispensed with nothing to control it, nothing to direct it in a productive way, then how are you going to get complexity out of that? How are you going to get complex structures? And there's tremendously complex structures in the biological realm. Well, they're complex because they're following a pattern. There's a code, and they're being built. These things are being built through the expenditure of energy according to a code, which is called the DNA double helix, and other things, amino acids that are giving directions to build particular complex things to do work. All right. But sans those machines, in other words, absent them, when you just have molecular action, it's hard to see how raw molecular action is not going to succumb immediately to the second law if it doesn't have something in place to direct the energy into something productive to produce something more complex.
Yeah.
That's the weakness, I think.
Okay.
And when I think,
good. You've given me a lot to think about.
Well, that's good. That's good. That's my job. Give you peace of my mind. But I am more and more astounded at the way evolution is being invoked. Because on the base, I think it fails completely on the merits, because what we'd have to look at is any part of the human body, any part. You just look at the blood clotting system. You look at eye movement. You look at peristaltic waves that we have like in our throat to swallow, or we have down in our intestines to move things along and they eventually evacuate it. All of these are very complex things. Very, very complex things. And all the capillaries' location and what they do. And that one set of your central nervous system, your rather circulatory system, brings blood in, and the other one takes blood out. And then there's a very sophisticated machine with this in human beings that have a heart that pumps with a certain number of cavities to do the work. And not all the hearts of all living things don't have the same. They have different ones. They're all so complicated. How is it that anyone can believe that these incredibly complex systems came about through a process of chance, mutation, and natural selection? That's the neo-Darwinian model. Now, this is being abandoned, in many cases because it's just not working. It doesn't work, but it ought not have even been accepted because it's so implausible on its face, unless somebody can show the pathways of mutation and natural selection that leads to these complex organisms. Then you could say it. But no, they look at finch beaks and they look at peppered moths, and they look at these fairly simple characterizations of microevolution, and then they wave their wand and they cover the entire living biosphere. Yeah. And so here I'm reading this book, Atomic Habits, and the guy says, well, see, your brain has evolved to work on smaller goals rather than larger goals. Now, look, that is complete and absolute nonsense. That is complete nonsense. How does anybody know? What they're doing is observing the way our brain works, assuming evolution is the only cause that we have, naturalistic, to accomplish that. Therefore, it must have evolved to that end. And this assumption is made all the time, and they're waving the wand of evolution and everything without doing the hard work of showing how this took place. Look, I walked out of my office a year or so ago, heading for my car after the show, and on the pavement there is a line of ants. Line of ants. You know how the ants, they're doing the ants are marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. They're doing their things. Now, they aren't following each other. They're sniffing their way along because there's a pheromone. There's a hormone that is placed along the way that causes them to know the track. If you put your finger on that and you rub that, they're going to come up to the where your finger rubbed, and then they're going to be looking at each other across the space of the finger rub and not know what to do.
Wow.
You can just do it. Anybody can do it.
Well,
Okay? Now, they're going to be walking around, and they're going to be looking for the trail. And eventually they're going to find the trail again, and then they'll be continuing. Okay? But here's the question. How do they know what to do? Forget about the complex structures of their body that allow them to move really fast and lift things that are 50 times their weight. Forget about that. How do they know where to go? How do they know to do what they do? They all have different jobs in the hive or in the colony, right? How do they know this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, evolution. You can't just do that. You can't just wave the wand. This is complex behavior for them building complex communities. It's hard to even imagine a sequence of events of mutation and natural selection that could possibly accomplish this incredibly complex task. And they're going to say, well, just because you don't know what it is doesn't mean it happened that way. Well, that's true. But that it also means that you have no right to assert that it did happen that way unless you can show it.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is what they almost never do. Almost never do.
The just so story.
Exactly right. It's exactly right. And just like Kipling, we're just going to tell the tales, we'll spin our yarns, and they do this all the time. And so anyway, I'm glad that you're facing this. I hope that this discussion about the second law is helpful. I think a lot of Christians have used it illicitly and then gotten caught by people who know better. And so I do think it's very helpful for origin of universe stuff. Okay, that's really, that you take that to the bank. When it comes to localized complex things happening, I don't think you have to be very careful how you employ the second law, because there are localized exceptions to that as long as the larger system is increasing in entropy. You could have localized examples of less entropy, or what appear to be that, more organization, because of the way the systems are working. But the system has to be in place to make that happen. That's what it looks like to me. So, and when people say, well, scientists have theorized, oh, fine, they can theorize all they want. You can speculate all you want. But showing that it actually happened this way, that's their job. And they can't claim that it happened this way unless they have good reason to say that this particular feature is a result of minute changes through genetic mutation chosen for on behalf of by natural selection. And this is what is almost never done with individual features.
Yeah, exactly.
All right?
Well, good. Thank you so much.
All right, John, great talking to you. Appreciate the chat.
Absolutely.
Okay, all the best. All right, let's take another break. And when I come back, we'll take some of your open mic calls. We're clear here, which means some of you may be listening and may want to call in. So let me give you the number. 855-243-9975. That's 855-243-9975. All right, open mic calls for the rest of the show, it looks like, unless you call in, 855-243-9975. Now, open mic calls are when you've already called in after a fashion. You can do that on the web. That's the best way to do that. And you can go to our homepage, str.org. You can look under podcasts and live broadcasts, and there'll be an opportunity for you to speak into your mic and push a button and leave your question. And that's what we've been dealing with in a number of shows recently, and I'm going there now. So let's talk or hear from Clyde. Is a question about progressive Christians. Clyde?
Mr. Koukl, Clyde here from Central Indiana. My wife and I are very blessed and honored to get to be strategic partners for Stand to Reason.
Cool.
And just realized we celebrated our 1-year anniversary as a strategic partner.
Wow.
Wanted to call in today to increase that amount. So happy to be able to have a very, very small role in supporting you and your team in the great ministry that you guys do.
Wow.
Thank you. My question is this. I have a dear friend that has become mired in progressive Christianity. This is a lifetime friend that, as a young man, accepted Christ, but unfortunately was never really discipled in the truth. And now, many, many years later, he is very involved in a progressive Christian church and has thoroughly bought into all the tenets of that false belief structure. He is very faith-friendly. He is willing to have conversation, although tends to mock historic, traditional Christianity. And so I wanted to get your advice how to gently and appropriately put pebbles in his shoe to stimulate just thought-provoking questions in his own heart that he can really examine his belief structure and how he has come to land where he has landed in progressive Christianity. Thanks so much. Appreciate all that you guys do.
Okay. Wow, that's great. And thank you, Clyde, and to your wife as well for being strategic partners. Always like to hear that, and also that you're upping your commitment. That was great, too. So super for that. And I hope this is going to be helpful. The thing about progressive Christians is that generally they used to be Christians, and now they're not. And as I'm not a specialist in this. Elisa Childers, this is her bailiwick. This is her unicorn. This is her, what do you call it? Her lane, okay? Her wheelhouse. She knows all about it. And I just suggest that to get up to speed on their ideas and some of the things that are wrong with them, that's the kind of thing that will help you to formulate the kind of questions that can put a pebble in their shoe. All right, Elisa Childers, Childers, okay? She's great. What I have gleaned, though, from her, and Tim Barnett has done a lot of work with this, too, deconstruction, they wrote a book together on Christian deconstruction, is a lot of people who leave Christianity and embrace so-called progressive Christianity, which is a kind of Christianity that is dismissive or rejects all of the discomforting aspects of Christianity, discomforting to them. So there's nothing that a progressive Christian is going to believe, probably, that's going to have create any trouble for that person with the rest of the world. They're not exclusivists. They tend to be very open to sexual expression of all kinds. They tend to be pro-abortion. Same-sex marriage is not a big issue. Jesus isn't the only way. That's the exclusivist issue. Well, the Bible, that's got a lot of discomforting aspects to it, but, it's man-made, so you don't have to believe all that stuff that makes you feel uncomfortable. And it's because of their bad experiences of different sorts with Christianity that they've decided to leave all of that discomforting stuff behind, but still want to call themselves Christians. But now they're progressive Christians. So this raises a couple of different issues for me, and you already hinted at one strategy to moving forward, and that is, well, what is it that you believe now that you reject from classical Christianity? By the way, you made a comment here, Clyde, about historic traditional Christianity is what your friend is kind of dismissive of. And I wonder about that. what historic traditional Christianity actually means to him. Now, I've used the phrase classical Christianity because when I say that, I'm speaking entirely theological. I am not speaking about any Christian traditions or any baggage that comes along culturally with Christianity in different areas. So you have, a kind of a fundamentalist Christian religion. That term is characteristically used pejoratively to describe Christians who not only believe the fundamentals, but have a bunch of other things packed in there. We don't smoke, drink, or chew, or go with those that do, kind of thing. And sometimes are very narrow and inappropriately judgmental and condescending and whatever. And so oftentimes with people who leave Christianity proper to embrace a different form of Christianity, like progressive Christianity, it's because of bad experiences they've had that are unrelated to the theology of Christianity, or possibly based on misunderstandings of the biblical teaching. For example, about slavery. The word slavery is in the Bible, but most of the time it should not be translated slavery. The Hebrew word is avad, E-B-E-D, if you anglicize it in the spelling, but pronounced avad. And that word is the same word used to translate into the English word servant. The problem with the word slave is the slave in American English conjures up all kinds of images that are unrelated to the text and what the writer is referring to. And in most cases, he's referring to an indentured servant. So, there's an example of people misunderstanding. They think that the Bible is promoting the kind of slavery that we experienced here in this culture for couple hundred years or whatever it was. And it's not like that at all. That's not what's going on. So there are misunderstandings and misperceptions about what the text teaches. Now, the only way you're going to find that out is from your friend, Clyde. You're going to have to ask your friend. So you're going to start out tactically asking a lot of questions to gather information. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? You say you're rejecting historic traditional Christianity. What is it about historical traditional Christianity that you're rejecting? Okay. Now, it may include some theological issues, but I bet there's a whole bunch of other things that are mixed in as well. And as I've looked at well-known people who have left Christianity, who have deconverted because they have deconstructed, they've taken the pieces of Christianity and said, I don't like this, I don't like that, they disassemble it. There's nothing left of classical Christianity, so now they're going to become progressive Christians. So you want to know, what is it that they've rejected and why? You don't have to answer or deal with the issues right away, but if he's willing to be in conversation, you said he's faith-friendly, then see what he says. What is it that he thinks is just flat out false? And that's the only way to approach it, by the way. It's not just what he doesn't like. Okay? There's a lot of things that we don't like that may be true. We get a doctor's diagnosis that we're dying of cancer. We need to treat it immediately or we're a goner. That's not good news. That's bad news. Guess what? I don't like that. But it doesn't mean it's not so. And if it is so, whether I like it or not, then we got to deal with it. So the real issue is what is true. Why do you think the claims of classical Christianity are false? Why did you leave Christianity? I presume that's what happened. That's what happens with most who become progressive. And just figure that out. Find out what it is. Now, I think one of the things you're going to learn is that some of the reasons they've left are based on a misunderstanding. Who's the guy plays for the Jets now, the quarterback, who used to be Aaron Rodgers? Yeah, used to be at the Packers. Okay. Aaron Rodgers, I wrote about this, and I think it may be in Street Smarts, but he had an interview with Dan Danica Patrick, the race car driver that used to be his girlfriend. In an interview, he's saying he's dissing classical Christianity. And I don't think he's a total non-believer or whatever, atheist. I'm not saying that. But he just says, how it doesn't make any sense to me how some religion can teach that God's going to send people to hell just because they don't believe in him. Well, do you realize that that's not what Christianity teaches? The demons also believe and they tremble, right? James. The Bible doesn't teach that people are going to hell because they don't believe in God. The Bible teaches that people are being punished for the wrong things they did. Genesis 20, or Revelation 20, rather. There it is. So now he's complaining about something in Christianity that's not even part of Christianity. Now, I heard him talking just recently in more favorable terms about Christianity. I don't know, maybe he's coming around. But I just use this as an example of people who are resistant to Christianity because they have a false, mistaken understanding about what Christianity teaches. And that's sometimes our fault, that we have not communicated. I mean, we, the body of Christ at large, have not communicated accurately. So first step, Clyde, is figure out what are the problems. A second question that comes to mind, and by the way, once you have those problems, then you can think about how you address those. But you got to know what those issues are first. One other thing that comes to mind is, so you consider yourself a progressive Christian. Yes. Okay. So, but you don't believe in all these other things that are characteristic of Christianity. Yes. Well, then in what sense are you a Christian? I'm curious. I'm confused, actually. Notice I'm role-playing here now. I'm confused, actually. You reject all those things that are characteristic of Christianity theologically, but you still call yourself a Christian. So what does that mean when you use the word Christian to describe yourself? You're just still gathering information. You're not putting him down. You're not pushing back on him. You're just, this is not clear. Now, of course, there is a little bit of a pushback there, isn't there? Because the implication is he's using the language in an illicit way. But you won't know that until he answers with some substance. And then you might say, hey, well, isn't that a little misleading to use the word Christian when you don't believe anything Christian? Well, I believe in Jesus. Okay, when you say you believe in Jesus, you mean what? Well, he's a nice guy, he's a good guy, this, that, and the other thing. I don't believe the rest of the stuff that Bible teaches. That Bible, you can't trust it. It was translated, retranslated, blah, blah. No, then they'll come up with this stuff that is meant to undermine the authority of the Scriptures. But see, now I have another question. Especially in particular if he says he has some view of Jesus that he thinks is different than the so-called classical Christian view. Jesus was a social justice warrior, or he was a avatar, or just a really nice guy who taught moral stuff that we should listen to. Now I have another question. And by the way, this I had developed a little bit in an article, A Solid Ground, that came out a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, 2020 or 2021. And the title of that Solid Ground, you can find it on our site, is the legend of the social justice Jesus. The legend of the social justice Jesus. And the whole goal there is to look at what does Jesus really say. But I make a point for those people who reject the biblical record and then come up with their own understanding of what Jesus is like, contra the classical understanding, the incarnate Son of God who came to die for sins in our place. Because there's a problem, and this is a problem that I focus in on one paragraph there. It's worth reading. And the problem is, if they reject the historical record that gives a picture of this supernatural Christ, who's the only way of salvation, who died on a cross for sins, if they reject that because they say you cannot trust the documents, okay, fine. I understand that. But then I have a question. Since you have your own view of who Jesus was, where are you getting your information about Jesus of Nazareth? You must think you're getting it from some reliable source for you to have what you think is a reliable opinion about who Jesus was and what he came to do. What is that source? Now, the problem, of course, and many of you have already seen this, is they've just disqualified the source. And if they've disqualified the source, which is the canonical Gospels, then there is no Jesus for them to have an opinion about. And if they're going to cherry pick, well, I like this part, not the other part, you say, wait, this isn't about what you like. You got to give me a reason why this particular statement is not accurate to the historical Jesus, and this one that you like is. That's dealing with the text with integrity. So there's a couple of strategies that you might pursue, Clyde, with your progressive Christian friend, and maybe some questions that you can ask, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I think that for the so-called progressive Christian, there are lots and lots of inconsistencies and problematic steps they make that can be exposed with questions. Okay, now, this, of course, doesn't mean that Christianity is true. Making the case that the Bible is reliable and that Jesus rose from the dead and all those other things, that's on our side, okay? But it's on their side to make sense of where they're standing now. And in light of their rejection, especially rejection of the New Testament. That's like pretty much all progressives are in that group. I also recommend that you get Elisa Childers' book, Another Gospel, where she goes through a lot of the details about progressive Christianity and answers the challenges of progressive Christianity, and Elisa's and Tim's book, The Deconstruction of Christianity. So both of those are going to be great sources. All right, let me run to a break here, and then we'll do our last segment on Stand to Reason. All right, I have a question that has come in on an email I'm going to go to. It's not on our open mic calls, but I'll just read it to you. And I think this person is an atheist. At least that's what I've been told. I don't manage all of these questions coming in and out from our website, but here's what he says. He says, Greg keeps saying everything was made from nothing. Hebrews 11:3 says things seen were made from things unseen, like energy. This is consistent with physics, which was discovered after that common thought of nothing was coined, the idea that everything comes from nothing. Please update your thinking. It ruins your witness if you get the science wrong. Okay, now, two things are in question here. One of them is my statement about everything coming from nothing, and the verse in Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 3, that said that the things that are made, that are seen, come from things that are unseen. What he thinks is referring to energy, and that is consistent with physics, but it's not nothing. Okay, well, you're right, it is not nothing. But I promise you the writer of Hebrews wasn't talking about energy. He had no concept of modern physics in any sense, and I don't think that the Holy Spirit was trying to smuggle some modern sense of physics into that sentence. I think he was making a completely different point that is unrelated to this. Now, my saying that everything was made from nothing, actually, it's equivocal. Depending on when I'm saying it, I could have meant different things. One point that I'm making is the standard Big Bang cosmological model, not molecule, is that there was when nothing exists and then something exists. There was when nothing existed. I didn't say there was a time, because on their model, time begins with the Big Bang. There was when nothing existed, and then something existed. Big Bang, the world, okay? So there was on this view no cause for the universe. It was uncaused, and it came into existence for no reason and with no purpose. Now, by the way, that's all tied in together. Those are all entailed together. If there was no cause, then there is no reason for the universe to come into existence and no purpose for the universe to come into existence. By the way, that's the standard model. So my point is, when the atheistic scientific community asserts Big Bang cosmology, they are asserting that there was nothing and then there was something. So everything was made from nothing. Now, obviously, that's a way of speaking in which we mean that it had no cause, because nothing is not a something you could make something else out of. So that everything came from nothing, there was nothing, then there was something. In that sense, that's not me. That's the scientific community. And I think that's inadequate, because our universal experience is of cause and effect. Everything that comes into existence seems to have a reason. Every event, everything that happens has a reason why it happened. All right? And so I'm just inferring from the metaphysical concept of cause and effect. It's not a scientific concept. It's metaphysical. It's a metaphysical concept that science trades on, but it's not science. That there must have been some adequate cause for the universe, because from nothing, nothing comes. Ex nihilo nihilo fit. All right? So that's one sense of the nothing. And that's the secular sense of everything coming from nothing. And even the energy that might have produced other things like matter had to come from somewhere, because there was when there was no energy at all. The other sense in which I use everything came from nothing is a standard classical theological point of view that God created everything that existed ex nihilo, from nothing. And all that means is he didn't start with some stuff that he made into other stuff. All he had was himself. And from the power of his being and the capability that he has as the ground of being and the omnipotent God, he can will things into existence that didn't exist before. That's creation ex nihilo, from nothing. Now, strictly speaking, and we got to keep in mind how we're using these words, if we say God created from nothing, the from nothing is not strictly true, because God isn't nothing. That thing that was created from nothing means God is the one that existed who made it, but didn't use anything else to form everything else. That's all it means. And I think that's exactly what the writer of Hebrews was speaking of. That the things that are seen were all made from things that were from the unseen. Who's the unseen? God. And in John chapter 1, verse 3, it says, all things came into being through him, the Word, which it just said was God in verse 1. And apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. That the Word, as the divine creator, was responsible for everything that came into being, and he didn't have to use anything else to do it. So I don't actually see how my point of view and the things I've said are in any way inconsistent with science, because even science acknowledges that there was when nothing and then something. All right? Now, the question is what caused that? And I think the best explanation, the smart money, is on that someone, not something, caused it. Someone who is unseen but capable of causing the universe caused it, which is what the story says. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. All that exists, God made them. Okay, so that's what I'm trading on, essentially. It's nothing tricky about that, nothing anti-science. Now, what I've done is I have inferred a creator from what science acknowledges as an absolute beginning of all matter and energy. Well, that's not scientific. Well, wait a minute. When you say that's not scientific, what do you mean? Well, science can't make an appeal to the supernatural. Wait a minute. Says who? That is not science. That is philosophy. That is materialistic philosophy that's being imposed upon the project. Science just tells you what happened. It doesn't tell you what's possible to happen and what happened in certain restrained arenas like the physical world. Okay, we got about 7 more minutes. I'm looking for another question here. Second coming of Christ, that's too complex. Let's go with Jonathan G. He's a question about the resurrection. All right?
Hey, Greg, I have a buddy of mine. We've been talking back and forth a lot, but he's been struggling with the resurrection of Jesus, that if it's credible, of course, there's a lot of people that will make the claim that Jesus was only, sleeping in the tomb, or that his apostles stole the body and they lied. How would you go about explaining to your friend or to a loved one the credibility of Jesus' resurrection? Where should I turn to that, to do my research? Mainly the 500 witnesses that claim to have saw Jesus in a vision, or that Jesus appeared to them. So that's my question, Greg. If you can help me out, I'd appreciate it. I'm just trying to do my own research, because it's a question that's stumping me. Not with my faith with Jesus, but just I want to help my friend out and put him on the right path. I don't want to lead him astray. So appreciate it, Greg. Thanks so much.
All right, Jonathan G. I've just got a few minutes to do this, so I'll do it in summary fashion. In order to prove a resurrection, all you need to have is some individual that is dead at one point in time and then alive at another point in time after it. That's it. And incidentally, I talk about this at length in The Story of Reality, so I recommend that you go there. I've got a whole section on this. And I drew from other people. Gary Habermas, Habermas, is a great source on this, all right? And so dead at one point in time, all right? The historical record shows that Jesus was crucified on a cross. Those that were attending to the crucifixion broke the legs of those on either side of Jesus in crucifixion because they were still alive, and the way to get them to die faster is to break their legs, because then they suffocate hanging from the cross. They didn't do that to Jesus because Jesus was dead. And just to make sure, they stuck a spear in his side, and what looked like water and blood came out, which is, now we know, a very particular circumstance, which makes it very clear that Jesus has died, and the serum and the red blood cells, whatever, are beginning to separate in the pericardium. Okay? So then those soldiers took him down, and then he was embalmed, according to the record, with 70 pounds of spices, wrapped in a deal, all wrapped up, basically mummified at first stages, and then put into a cold tomb with a stone rolled in front of it. So this is a guy that wasn't dead, but after 3 days revived in that environment, and then came out of the tomb, got rid of the stone, and then convinced his disciples that he was the Lord of glory? Do you see how implausible that is? Now, this is the swoon theory, the idea that Jesus wasn't dead, that he just kind of fainted and then revived. But if you look at the details of the account, none of the details in the account allow that to be a reasonable alternative. You have professional killers that acknowledge he's dead and poked him in the side with a spear just in case. You had his family members who are very familiar with that. They had to prepare his body. They know what dead bodies are like because dead bodies go through physical changes very rapidly. You know, rigor mortis, for example, blood goes to the bottom part of the body following the gravity, all kinds of different things. They would have noticed this. And then they pack him with spices and put him in a cold tomb. This is not a recipe for revival. So it's not the odds-on favorite that he got revived. Why would anybody think that? The second thing is the disciples lied. All right? Now, if the disciples lied about Jesus, first of all, where's the body? And that's another point. The tomb is empty. Nobody ever produced the body. Producing the body would have put that lie to death immediately. Okay, where's the body? Even the people who in charge said to the soldiers who were guarding the tomb, just tell them that the disciples stole the body. So everybody acknowledges the body's gone. Okay? So the Jews wanted Jesus dead. The Romans wanted Jesus dead. Why would anybody steal a body? Oh, the disciples might. Why would they steal it? So they can pretend like he rose from the dead. Why would they do that? They just crucified Jesus. That's what Jesus got for saying what he said. Now you're going to pretend like he rose from the dead, and you're going to go out and say what he said so you can get yourself killed too? When you know that he did not rise from the dead, and that's the key here. Lots of people die for a lie. But how many people die for a lie when they know it's a lie? That's the problem. And on that characterization, the disciples stole the body. They knew they were lying. So why would they go through all of the persecution they went through? You know, for that. They start suffering for this. And, of course, they were vulnerable. They didn't all die a martyr's death, but they were vulnerable to that, and some did. You know, if they're all lying, they're going to think, wait a minute. Oh, you're going to lash me? You're going to whip me? You're going to cut my head off? That's Paul. You're going to crucify me upside down? That's Peter. Wait a minute. What was I thinking? Just joking. No, this doesn't make any sense either. If anybody knew that Jesus didn't rise from the dead, it would be the disciples, and they wouldn't put their life on the line for a lie that did them no good. So those are two examples that don't go anywhere. They don't work. I talk about more in the Story of Reality. I commend that to you. If you look at Gary Habermas's material, you'll find that too. Great stuff. You're on solid ground arguing for the resurrection. You just need more details. All right, friends, thanks for being part of our show today. Greg Koukl here for Stand to Reason, Give 'em Heaven, all right? Bye-bye now.